Ready?
I can't remember who said, I was hoping that there would be a student here in person,
Okay.
but Angela may know. Dr. Webster probably.
Good evening, everybody. Mr. Pruitt will be joining us via Zoom. He was taking the necessary precautions for all of us, and Wes, we appreciate that. Tonight, I'm going to let Shelley Mell introduce some young ladies who have been working on a project that I think will interest us. It's on the history of the Pine Street area, and I think, Shelley, I'll just turn it over to you at this point.
Sure. I was approached by Andrea Woods, and she can come up to the podium if she'd like, about partnering with UCA and helping us to record some oral history in Conway and in the Pine Street community. And I had the wonderful opportunity to introduce her to Mrs. Leona Walton at the Pine Street Museum to kind of start it off. If you know Mrs. Walton, she can introduce you to anybody and anybody you need to know in that area. And that's what you need. You need to make sure you're reaching out to the right people. So Andrea was instrumental. I'll let you tell a little bit about the people, wonderful faces that I see on the Zoom screen
Oh
there.
gosh, there's so many wonderful people. Thank you for having us. By the way, it's kind of you to work us into your schedule. I know you're really busy, and this is after working hours, so thank you. During the Black Lives Matter protests not too long ago, and after some community meetings, I came home and spoke with my husband, who many of you know is a history professor at Arkansas Tech, and just how troubled I was about all of it. And then it led into discussions about history and really knowing who we are and who our friends are and who the people we love are. Colleagues, people I'd known for 20 years, I didn't know their stories. And I felt that I had failed them as a friend and had failed as a leader in our community because I still had never heard Ronnie Williams' story until that happened. And I've known him so many years. So we reflected and we decided to reach out to UCA, who is always a great partner in everything that seems to happen in our community, and had met Dr. Angela Webster several months before at a women's panel, I believe, and reached out to her, and she said she would help me champion this at UCA because I didn't know my way around the academic side of all of the things that have to happen if we wanted to engage students to help to record Conway's history, our Black history, and have that available through the UCA archives and available online to anyone who could ever want to view it. And we interviewed several students, and I was so amazingly impressed. I don't get much opportunity to work around college students. They are very motivating. They can be frustrating, I'm sure, but they're also just very motivating, and it gives you great hope for our futures. And so we interviewed, we only had, Jeff and I had funding for 3 students, and I called Bunny Adcock and said, we just got to do a 4th. And he, in 2 seconds, had called the foundation, and there you go, there's a 4th. So we have an amazing group of students that they're just so impressive, and their futures are so bright. And they have compiled this amazing history. I hope have learned a lot through the process because they're getting credit for it at UCA. And I want to thank especially Reva Brown, Dr. Brown, who's online, and Dr. Webster again for all the time and effort it took, and Dr. Little to actually make this happen and be successful. I have not seen what these students have put together yet, so this is fresh for me, but I wanted to expose you all to it and hope that we'll be able to get all of their work product out into the community and that they can proudly call it their own. Thank you.
I was going to say, I'm not sure which student is going to share anything online. I think you just have to unmute yourself. They're all looking. Or Aaron, do you have to unmute them, or can they?
I think we can.
There you go, Blake. We can hear you.
There we are. I guess I'll share my screen. Okay. Miss Chauncey. Oh, there he is.
Can you see me?
Yep, you're good.
All right.
So my name is Blake Johnson, and I am one of the interns for the Community Race and Oral History Project, and my fellow intern, Chauncey Williams, is here. Our other two weren't able to make it, LaKendria Jeter and Austin Ashley. But before we get started, I would like to give special thanks to Miss Andrea Woods, who is our benefactor, Dr. Angela Webster, the Associate Vice President of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion at UCA, and also our internship coordinators, who were kind of our supervisors from our various departments. Dr. Reva Brown from the Public Relations and Journalism Department, Dr. Jennifer Case from the Creative Writing Department, Dr. Kim Little from the History Department, and Miss Angela Weiser from Journalism.
Right. So as Blake mentioned, two of our interns, our fellow interns, were not able to make the meeting, unfortunately. But you do have the two of us. So we tend to look on the brighter side of things here and throughout the course of this project. But the two of our interns that were not able to make it are Austin Ashley, who is majoring in journalism, LaKendria Jeter, also majoring in journalism, myself, Chauncey Williams, majoring in creative writing, and we've already met the wonderful Blake Johnson, who is majoring in theater and African American studies, and all of which you graduated, I do believe. So congratulations to you all there.
So some of our goals for this project was basically to record and document stories that offered a testament to the history of race in the Conway area. We were seeking to highlight African Americans who've been in the area for some time and who were able to give or share some of their experiences with race in Conway. The wider goal for our project is to promote greater unity within the Conway area by telling these stories of Conway's racial past and seeing what we can draw and learn from them. This project was also a great educational opportunity for us, as it provided us with experience with working in public history, which hopefully we can use as we all branch out to our various career paths.
And if we could go back to that slide just for a moment, I'll just elaborate a bit on this one. So some of those duties that we did have, and this is getting into the next one as well, including locating potential interview subjects within the Conway and Faulkner County area, drafting questions for the interviews and whatnot. And some additional goals that we had set for ourselves were to gain more valuable firsthand experience with the interviewing process, so the process of interviewing our subjects. Also working in accord with our team, so us interns as a team, and keeping that line of communication open with our supervisors, and also working to gain more experience in telling our stories, and not only the stories of the interns themselves, but the members of the Conway and Faulkner County area. And so we were able to gain more experience telling those stories of our community members, while also working to uplift and promote Black and African American history in Arkansas. And so that brings us to the process of how we went about this internship. So we were able to connect with our community liaisons and field supervisors to find those interviewees. So our community liaisons were community leaders, and they offered names and contact information to us, the student interns, so that we could figure out possible people to interview and get those opportunities for discussing a perspective of the Conway community in the present and in the past. So the beautiful thing about this project is that we have a wide range of interviewees. And so they were able to give their take on things that happened in Conway in the past for some of the older members of the community. And then we had some younger members of the community as well, who were able to speak to both past and present events that were going on. So the dynamics of the project are very wide, and it was a beautiful experience, to say the least.
So when we were choosing people to interview, we tried to make sure that We selected a wide array of people representing different genders, ages, backgrounds, and occupations. And some of the people we interviewed included community people, people like Mrs. Katarine Henderson, Mr. Corey Grant, Mr. Kerry Allen, and Mr. Ronnie Williams. And throughout our interviews, different themes popped up.
And so, just to speak to, could we go back to that slide just for a bit again? I'm going to elaborate on some of the individuals we have here. So just to speak to the diversity of the project, we were able to interview Mr. Brantley Douglas, who was the Associate Director of Bands and Director of Athletic Bands at UCA. Just to name a couple of people, Dr. Shanil Ely, who is the Associate Vice President of Outreach and Community Engagement. And her grandmother was able to be there as well as part of the interview. So wonderful dynamic there. We also had Miss Leona Walton, who was the director of the Pine Street Community Museum. A beautiful, beautiful facility. So much rich history there. We also were able to interview Dr. Lloyd Hervey, who is an accomplished educator and a retired interim president of Philander Smith College. So some of you may know is here in Little Rock. Actually, fun fact about myself, I live right around the corner from it. Mr. Corey Garrett, who is a Black realtor in Faulkner County, and part of one of the only Black-owned real estate company in the area. And Miss Ernestine Ackland, a teacher in Faulkner County School District with over 30 years of experience. And Miss Bianca Moten, just want to make sure I get that name, which is one of the younger individuals on the list and owner of the LA Beauty Bar and daughter of the notable Moten family, as I'm sure many of you may be familiar with. All right. And so some of those recurring and noteworthy themes that we noticed throughout the project. First of all, of course, was the resilience of a people. We were able to get the first take, firsthand experiences from members in the Conway community. And there was so much of a richness of that history that we were able to glean from those individuals. And just listening to how some of those people had to fight, for lack of a better term, to get the things that they deserve, that they rightfully deserve. And I know one instance of an interview that AJ and myself had the pleasure of conducting, Austin Ashley, who is not here with us, but we learned for one of the downtown theaters way back in the community that African Americans were not able to use the front doors in many facilities. And so they would often have to use the back doors. And there was segregation. So in facilities such as that, theater specifically, there was separation. So normally the Caucasian members of the community would be on the ground floor and the African Americans would be up above in the balcony area. So just learning about how they were able to overcome so many trials and tribulations, it was absolutely inspiring and enlightening. And no doubt is such a beautiful, heart-wrenching yet beautiful experience for them to talk about. Blake, would you like to talk about closeness of the community?
Yeah, another thing that popped up was the importance of community and how important those communal relations were and should be today. I know Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Allen both kind of gave an interesting, especially Mr. Allen gave an interesting perspective on the history with integration in the Conway area and what it kind of did with community. They talked about the Pine Street community pre-integration and how everyone was kind of like interconnected, the Black community, because they kind of had to rely on each other with the school district and the churches. And they kind of talked about how everybody's kids was everybody's kids and like everybody looked out for everybody's kids, and everybody was each other's responsibility. But they gave an interesting perspective on like how after integration happened and the Pine Street School shut down, while it was good that there was a mixing between how the black community was decentralized from the Pine Street area, in a way it kind of the community was kind of dispersed, and and they talked about how we should kind of bring that back, that communal aspect of like taking care of each other, and how like now it's harder to kind of point out who the black communities are in the city because there are like more decentralized.
Yes, and that's where the aspect of shared responsibility and interdependence comes into play. So when you're building a community, no doubt you want that community to be a community, right? So the fact that that community was so dispersed at that time as a result of those things that took place, there was a sort of weakening. If you think about these things, there was a sort of weakening in the foundation of the community. But the beautiful thing about Conway and the Faulkner County area is that the people there were able to overcome that weakness. And that's something that was attested to and alluded to throughout the project and throughout the interviews. I know Miss Leona Walton, one of the things that she had mentioned was that the things that they did on the weekend and got in trouble for with their parents, they would come to school and get in trouble for those same things. So we can really see that the beautiful aspect of that shared responsibility and taking community seriously, because it takes more than a word. Community is more than a word. It's a very active word. It's an active force. And so in order to say that you're a community, you have to be able to back those things up with more than your words. You have to back them up with your actions. And so we were able to see through this project how that shared responsibility and that interdependence came into play back then, and then how it comes back into play now, because there is a need for the community to get back to where it was, as many people, such as one person here we have, Mr. Corey Garrett, who mentioned about that aspect as well. So sharing that responsibility, and I'd like to quote him, one of the things that he said is that it's okay to fail, and you shouldn't be afraid to initiate conversations. So even if that means talking to those who are outside of your social group, who are outside of your race, it's important to have that shared responsibility across those borders, so to speak. But it's also equally important to have that aspect covered within the community. And so those things, when they work in tandem, they work to strengthen the community. And it's something that we were able to witness as we were working on this project. And just being able to be a part of something that's so beautiful, so impactful, that sets a precedent, not only for us as students, but for the students to follow, for the next internship that will be able to involve the African American communities of Faulkner County. And so it was an honor and a privilege. And one of the things that I said is that when we came together to work on this project, it was a little heady at first. We were a little nervous. And the Conway community, the African American communities of Conway and Faulkner County, I like to say that they helped us. We planted the seed, but the community was able to help that seed flourish. They held us up and thus held this project up to the sun and allowed it to bloom into the beautiful thing that it is today. And with that, we can move on to the section where if you all have any questions you'd like to ask, you may do so.
So how soon will we be able to see some of the oral histories?
Blake, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I believe the completion date is next week, next Tuesday. I think we're all in our final process of like editing and everything and getting everything compiled and solidified. But the project is basically finished, and you should be seeing it by next week.
Blake and Chauncey, are y'all from Conway? Did you grow up in Conway?
Oh, go ahead, Blake.
I'm actually from Stuttgart, Arkansas, but I've been attending college in Conway for the last 5 years. So, yeah.
Good, we're glad.
And I,
Chauncey?
I myself, I'm actually from Little Rock, but I've been attending UCA and been affiliated with the Conway area for the past 3 years.
We are glad that y'all are here, and thank you for the work that you put in on this project. Y'all are obviously doing fantastic work. Mr. Jones, would you agree? Say something.
It's just a lot of stuff that they haven't covered. I mean, a lot.
We can barely hear you, Theo.
Said that. Thank you, Wes. I said it's a lot of things y'all haven't covered. I'm sure y'all have talked to a lot of people. Like Ronnie and myself are close friends. We grew up together. So there's a lot of history. I mean, a lot that y'all haven't even touched on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, me and him been friends forever. And I remember everything he's telling y'all about. I lived it with him. And I wish that y'all would find some older people to tell you exactly what it was like. I mean, y'all got a rough idea of what it was like, but you cannot believe what it really was like. But I appreciate it.
If I may respond, Alderman, absolutely true. With this being an internship, we had funds sufficient for starting at 3, eventually 4 students. And then they are limited in scope and time, obviously, because of the semester, and then COVID made things even more interesting for everyone. That's the reason for everything lately is COVID. But we did encourage them to reach out, and we wanted them to be certain, especially just because we have a lot of elderly folks in our community who may pass. And you never know when someone's like, of course, young people can as well, but we wanted them to reach out to them. I was also very interested and encouraged them to make sure that there were women represented, because very often history is written by men, whether they're black or white. And so they did do the best that they could, I believe, with the time constraints, which is another reason that we hope that we'll be able to have funding for this project to continue again in the future. So hopefully we'll have another group. And then we have offered up, Blake just reminded me, we have met via email. Any of the individuals, they didn't have the time and ability to get their stories, and they have to edit them and have this complete product and snippets to put on social media and all that stuff within the semester, that we would like to have some kind of a connection to the other project that's up and coming with hopefully some grant money as well. But very good point and well taken.
Well, I wasn't saying it in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying I understand it's a paper for them and a project or whatever, and I'm not saying it in a negative way, but there is a whole lot. I mean, a whole lot out there. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I wasn't saying negatively. I'm just saying.
Okay, thank you.
No,
I shouldn't
no,
have
I'm
rushed and
I'm just
assumed
telling
that
you, I live
it was a criticism. But hopefully UCA could stay involved as well. I'd love for the other colleges to be able to be involved. And if you all know people who need to participate, definitely keep the list and try to be as thorough as we can.
And we would like to see y'all back for the presentation of the oral history. Mr. Ledbetter and I went to school with Leona. We know she's a handful. So we'd like to hear that. Anyway, thank you, Ms.
Thank
Wood,
you very
and your
much.
husband, and to Andy, and to Bunny Adcock. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake and Chauncey. We certainly appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, if y'all remember our last council meeting, we discussed a timeline for the RAISE grant, and I think James has one prepared for y'all at this time. So, James, if you would, please step up. Mr. Grimes was called away, so we'll bring him up to speed later after this meeting. Thank you.
Not to be accused of what they call perseverating, but to that point, we do on the 27th, the city received I'd say a pretty good sizable grant to work on an African American history context for citywide, and we have a public meeting on the 27th, which will be on Zoom, which we're coordinating with them, that I think hopefully will tell a broader story, broader picture of sort of the history of the African American experience in Conway. So I'm excited about it, and glad I finally got to meet Andrea as well. So, but I think it's a great opportunity for a big partnership. So switching gears on, RAISE grant, and approaching this, obviously this is an item that's been discussed a lot, and I guess sort of framing, I think it's important or good to point out the fact that when we're discussing this and looking at this, that we're really not in any way anymore have a difference of opinion on what we should pursue, right? It's not a matter of what we're going after. It's a matter of how we go after it. And I think that's a big step. It's a point of unity. I think it's a really big moment for us in that. So I gave y'all sort of where we left off in the discussion last time was talking about sort of scope of work, what the planning grant would involve and whatnot. So I wanted to go over that kind of briefly in terms of what the purpose of that would be and what it would fund. So with it, the main thing would be a finalized route for Connect Conway that's planned with consideration of the new aspects of the grant. So one of the big things that's kind of changed everybody's mind about this is the new selection criteria involving racial equity, environmental sustainability, and improvements in areas of persistent poverty. And so it's really not about throwing away what's been done previously, the work that's been done previously. It's about building on it and refining it, I would say, in that.
James, I was just going to ask, so is that the section, because I know one thing that we discussed at the last meeting was the importance of the community input and involvement. So I'm assuming that's kind of, when you're talking about finalizing the route, behind that are public meetings and community meetings and things like that too.
Yes, yeah, so those next two lines talk about fund planning, design, and environmental review up to what we would say a reasonable point of a categorical exclusion. I don't know a ton about NEPA, but I know once you get to that point, that's a good thing to hear is categorical exclusion. Part of that in that planning and both with the environmental review is having public engagement on the front end. So the idea is that we're not throwing anything away, but we are having public engagement to help refine those things. And so there would be kind of two parts to this. There would be a phase one that's a reconfigured Connect Conway project, and then there's basically a phase two that is a sort of a larger expansion of that to look out another 5 to 7 miles of trails. So with that. And with that second phase, we're thinking about things like building out essentially a greenway system, Little Creek Greenway, the Little Creek to Stone Dam Creek Greenway. So we've got a lot of stuff that we've worked on with Stone Dam Creek, that Southern Extension Trail, making that into a true greenway to tie back in around Lake Conway. Looking at Tucker Creek tributaries and greenways on those, and then also looking at capping some of the existing concrete ditches and putting trails on those. So it's really, in a lot of ways, expanding. Yes, sir.
On that subject, Mr. Winningham advised me this afternoon, back when we first heard about our raise money, dollars that we received.
We can't hear online.
That's my bad. I got to hit that little red button, Wes. My bad. Back when we were discussing the raise monies that Conway was going to receive, it was a very small, narrow scope of projects that could be paid for with that money. I contacted French Hill and asked him if he could advocate for us using that for stormwater runoff. And Mr. Winningham advised me this afternoon that that has been approved. So along the lines of what James is talking about, it'll allow us to rebuild a lot of our deteriorating drainage projects and cap them and use those for walkways and sidewalks. So I'm sorry, did I say something out of line, Mr.?
That's the rescue plan grant, not the raise grant, or the rescue plan act,
Yes.
not the raise grant.
Yes, but they are two separate things, but I've been crossed up with them all week, so.
But we can get it, right?
But we can get them, that's the good part, we can use that money for that. So Finley, get ready to get on the drainage.
Yeah, I've had confusion between build and raise and Tiger and ARP and all those things. It's been all over the place.
Yeah, they threw acronyms at me all week. I can understand fire service acronyms. I do not understand planning and street acronyms, so I understand what you're saying.
So with the proposed trail elements, sort of the idea of conceiving of this is that we're not wanting to copy Northwest Arkansas, but we are wanting to match or exceed the quality of what's been done up there. And so the idea is, 12 to 14 foot shared use path. So that means really making something that is a very comfortable environment for people 8 to 80. They call these 880 cities, that if you're an 8-year-old or you're an 80-year-old, that it's an environment where we're comfortable. And so the idea is about crafting a human environment or building a human environment where people are really comfortable and making sure that all those small details about this, things like, our trail amenities, bike repair stations, having water, trailheads, that this is, thinking about this in a really comprehensive way of making sure that this is as good as possible in looking at that, having defined lighting standards. So, one of the great things is on a lot of our new boulevards, in downtown, we have a very set defined lighting standard. It'd be great to have a similar lighting standard that we, relay that has a very high quality throughout the entirety of our trail system. New trailheads at key destinations, possibility maybe safe spots where free Wi-Fi where a kid could go and, have somewhere they could do homework, things like that. Little Creek floodplain restoration, so behind Conway Commons. Looking at that, I think that's a tremendous opportunity to make it more than just a trail behind a shopping center. That we can take that and restore it and make it a real amenity, put a lot of trees in, do things that make it look nice so that it doesn't just feel like you're walking behind a shopping center, that it feels like you're walking along this really nice greenway. It could be, I think, a centerpiece. And then also sort of a broader idea of creating the comprehensive Little Creek Greenway. So going from Don Owens down to Lake Conway. This idea that this is going to be sort of the East Conway twin to the Kinley Trail. That we've got one that goes like this, and we got one that goes like this, and sort of these two matching there. So those are some of the concepts of the idea of the trail itself. There'd be, as I said earlier, 2 phases to this. Phase 1 would be designed around the reconfigured Connect Conway idea that would be intended for a 2022 construction grant. So it would need to be expedited, going through planning, design, environmental review, public engagement, all of those things for that revised route. Part of the idea of the revised route is that we would basically be connecting from the Kroger on Salem all the way back over to the Don Owens complex and taking various routes. Now, in our discussions, obviously it needs to be planned because there's impacts on certain areas, how you get across the UCA campus, exactly what's the best way to get from that Kroger Salem. But it ultimately would have a strong connection with the Stone Dam Creek Greenway, Kinley Trail, and this new leg as well. So it'd all be tied in together with that. The other idea is that we're thinking about the additional integrations into the neighborhoods. So if it's somewhere that's next to a school, we connect it to a school, but then we also look at the connection from the school over into the neighborhood so that we have a continuous path for if somebody's a middle school kid, and they're wanting to go somewhere that they can go through, they can go to school, then they can hop on this and they can go. So it's a sort of this comprehensive system with that. Then looking at phase 2, which would be another 5 to 7 miles of trails, that would be intended to be pursued with later subsequent grants through MetroPlan, through RDOT, those types of things. Lining it out, I mean, it might be things like going across Morgan, doing other things that integrate the two sides of the community together. And then also looking at e-bike feasibility study as part of that. There's something to look at. That's kind of one idea. I think so you have this concept of let's go after a planning grant to do this. Councilmember Mel brought up, I think, is a pretty good idea of what if we just started doing the planning now and then did it all in one construction grant for 2022? I think if you want to expand on that, I don't really have anything that I think is any big opposition to that at all. I think it's a fine idea.
Yeah, I think that, and I had emailed James and Bart about this, is the one thing that worries me is some of the quick timelines we have. Hurry up and get the planning grant done. Now, that's money we don't have, which we could use, and that's a pro in my mind for doing the planning grant. Or do we take the next 15 months, knowing we want to do a construction grant in 2022, and do all these things ourselves without the planning grant money? And that's the part I don't know. And for things like the public meetings, you have a new staff person coming on that I think can help spearhead this project. It gives us time to work with Tyler and others about what matching funds might be available for the actual construction. It gives us time to kind of plan that in conjunction with what we want to do. So that was my only rationale for kind of bringing that up. I just thought, is anybody else feeling rushed? We're going to hurry up and do this planning grant, and then we'll find out if we get it, and then we'll have to hurry up and do that. Is it better to take 15 months and do the full grant? And I'm really okay either way. I mean, I guess I was thinking more about our staff and I think the competency that we have with our staff who I think could do this. So I was trying to weigh the advantages and disadvantages. Like I said, planning grant, if we get it, is more money to put towards this.
My wife would definitely appreciate it over the next 8 weeks.
Yeah, but I think regardless of whether we go for the planning grant, in July, we're still going to have to start working on the grant as a whole anyways, just because we just don't have enough time.
James, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, I'm done.
James, it looks to me like you've done a lot of the planning on this already. I mean, as I see what you've laid out here,
There's a big difference between concept and getting down to it being nailed down and absolutely designed. One thing that I have learned over time is that when something gets drawn on a map, it's one thing and it looks great and man, that makes sense. When you get down to the nitty-gritty details of walking it and looking at, okay, we're going to need a head wall here. We got to put these drainage improvements in. And there's just this whole minutia of detail. And then you start getting into the minutia of how do we make this feel comfortable? When I worked in Bentonville, now I was a peon at that time, but it was very early on. It was 2004 to 2007. And I still remember the day that one of the Walton brothers came in the room and said, I want to start building trails. And I just saw this guy in jeans. I was like, wow. And I was like, that guy's a billionaire. It was a very interesting moment for me. But some of the things that the city did early on, they had gotten some federal grants for trails. And it's like, well, yeah, we need to connect here to here. And it was like, well, yeah, that's great. And once we saw it built, we're like, oh, that didn't come out quite the way that we wanted it. And they started to learn things from that. And I think it's really important to craft it and dive into it really deep. That it makes it somewhat difficult. So I would say, have we put a lot of thought into it since the notice of funding availability came out? Absolutely. It's probably a considerable amount. I'll say that.
okay. We're aware that MetroPlan, if they've not already done it this week, is getting ready to make some grants available we aware of that? Trails?
You talking about the TAP and the RTP grants that they do annually?
There's some grants that are getting ready to be available. I talked to the director down there 10 days ago.
Is that the, kind of the regional,
Yes.
connecting the,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, so they've put it, so me and Finley, we're both on the steering committee for that regional trails plan, putting together basically what they want is a caucus of some of the Faulkner County folks that can be advocates for it. But part of that is planning the regional trails, which again, with that, some of the ideas that came out of that that are part of the priority are connecting from Maumelle to Worcester and Greenbrier. And so that gives us, additional things that we have to think about, because there's some serious challenges in how you get from north to south across the community there, but I think could be a nice, have some accesses there. I would think probably what they're talking about is the surface transportation block grants that they send out a call for those every year. So like last year, the $3 million that we got for the bridge for Salem Road with the trail underpass, we got the largest award of any community in Central Arkansas, but it's one of those pieces of that funding.
You mentioned something, and I think that might be an important component for our project moving forward, is you talked about a steering committee. And I think having the appropriate people, at the table, whether it's somebody from the neighborhood or somebody from Conway Corp or the school district or obviously you guys and whoever, I think that can be real important to make sure that we've got the necessary partnerships and input. Of course, the last thing we want is kind of what happened with this one, was, the neighbors go, "What do you mean it's going down Bruce Street?" We don't want something like that to come up. And so, I would advocate for something like that as part of this process.
We've got a real opportunity to work together as a
Yeah,
community on this.
yeah.
We do.
That's why I think it's important to take our time, do it right, and do that instead of trying to rush through and meet a deadline or whatever, in my opinion.
And this, if we were to be awarded this grant, this will be transformational for Conway in a lot of ways.
I mean, if y'all want us to hold off and start working immediately on the 2022 grant, I'll say this: we're already there, so we're already working on it. But I think we're more than happy to do that, and we're ready to go.
I want us to do it right. Yeah.
All right.
So, go ahead, Mr. Jones.
How much money are we talking about missing out on?
In terms of the grant, well, if you pursue the planning grant, that probably would be somewhere in the range of 500,000 to $1 million. When we're looking at the construction grant, so inevitably in either way, construction grant, that's going to be somewhere between 5 million and 20-ish. It depends on how the project's configured. You don't want to have a project that's too small, because we've previously gotten rejected for that reason, that the project was too small, and then we've had to go back and forth, yo-yo with it. But so from a practical standpoint, on the funding of that design, 500,000 to $1 million. But
Well, let me ask you something. Would it be better for us to make sure that we had enough and not going back and forth? I mean, like they're talking about waiting to maybe ask for more than we need and have to go bouncing back and forth? I mean, would it be better prepared if you waited till then?
so I think the purpose of the planning grant would be to figure out how much we really need to ask for. If we take Councilmember Mel's approach, then essentially what we're doing is we're backing up, and we're also getting a good determination how much money do we need to ask for. So in either situation, we're backing up saying, okay, how do we given the circumstances right now, how do we properly configure this project so that it works for what the community needs, what would get funded, all of those elements in one.
And I was trying to remember, how much of the total money was available for planning grants? It's a small percentage.
30 million,
Yeah. So
out of $1 billion.
out of $1 billion, so it was a smaller amount. And that's why I said I was kind of, you know, it's additional work for you all to put together, you know, the proposal and get it ready by July 1st. We might get the money, we might not, it'd be nice to have, but on the other hand, I think we have some talent to do it ourselves and know what we want with the end product.
We would absolutely give it our hardest effort, I'll say that.
Thank you, James. So, council, if we all agree, and Mr. Hawkins, do you have a question? Okay. If we agree, then I like Shelley's approach that we go ahead and use, we do have very competent staff. We have the resources, and let's just move forward with a date shooting for 2022 and give them time to do all their environmental and public meetings. And since I've already thrown the aquatic center on Sheila, I'm gonna throw this one on you, Miss Mel. You wanted to have a steering committee. I think it's a great idea. So I would like for you to be the council's representative for this. And I think school district and BPAB, yeah, Conway Corp, not folks. So any concerns, any thoughts from
So
me?
when is the deadline in 2022?
When's the deadline in 2022, James?
I just want to make sure we got it on the calendar. We're not going to miss anything. We're going to make it.
It would depend on when they come out with the NOFA, but based on similarity this year, it would, this year is due in July. So it's going to depend, it'll depend on when they send out that notice of funding availability. That will start the clock for when it's due. But yeah, we would roughly have about 15 months.
Please do
Great.
not miss that date.
Yeah.
We will not miss
Absolutely,
that.
I
yes.
don't think it's going to
I
happen
mean,
this
we're
year.
gonna give you this rope.
Yep,
Yeah,
You've got the
absolutely.
rope.
He's
Absolutely.
he's going to
going
use
to
it.
do. He's going to make sure it gets done.
last date.
Yeah, we
No,
didn't.
we
miss
didn't.
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Walden will, he and his team will not miss the date. They are very good at what they do, and I have complete confidence and trust in them. 100%. Absolutely. Okay, council, he did throw out one of those acronyms right there that I didn't understand. So, anyway, council, thank you for your time on this, and we'll take about a 10-minute break, and we'll start at 6:30. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Glad to have you back for our 6:30 meeting. Mr. Grimes, glad you're back. Mr. Pruitt, glad you're joining us via Zoom. We always proceed each council meeting with a word of prayer and pledge of allegiance. If you would like to, please feel free to join us. You would bow, please. Lord God, we thank you for your goodness, your grace, your mercy, and your awesome power. Lord, we thank you for this great city you've given us. We pray that everything we do bring honor and glory to your name. It's in your name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hawkins?
Here.
Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Mr. Pruitt?
Here.
Ms. Mel?
Here.
Mr. Ledbetter? Here. Ms. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Isby?
Here.
Okay, you should have received copies of the city council minutes for April 27th. Any corrections or changes?
Make a motion for approval as submitted.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0. As you may or may not know, Conway School Superintendent Greg Murray is retiring. And Conway has been blessed by having a number of great superintendents in the past. Mary and Mr. Ledbetter and I are old enough to remember H.L. Stanfield, and then Carl Stewart, James Clark, Steve Fulmer, Ray Simon, and currently Dr. Greg Murray. And Dr. Murray has done a tremendous job for the Conway Public Schools. He's been a tremendous partner for the Conway School District. And Dr. Murray, I don't know if you're watching or not, we appreciate the job you've done in Conway, and we hate to see you go, but we understand moving back to where the grandkids are is a big thing. So thank you, Dr. Murray. As you're all aware, we had a lot of things going on in the city the last year with COVID. And after a trip to Washington, D.C. in February of last year, it was brought to our attention that COVID was going to be a pretty big influencer in Conway and in the United States as a whole. And I turned to Chief Winter and asked him, I said, Mike, this is going to fall under your purview since you're the incident commander for large-scale incidents in the city. I said, I need someone that you think can handle this. And he never hesitated a minute. He said, I think Ty Ledbetter is the guy that can handle this for us. And I met with Ty and Chief Winter, and you could tell from the start that he was going to be the guy that took the reins and led on this thing. And all of the meetings that started, everyone that got together, all of the groups that got together is attributed directly to Ty Ledbetter. He is the man who, he got a good education in local politics, as well as working with a variety of people and business folks. And they're all great people, and they all worked well with Ty. But we could not have done this in Conway. We could not have survived as well we did without Ty's help. And his dad actually gave him the name of COVID Cowboy, and it stuck. But anyway, there's a bunch of Ledbetters here tonight, and anytime you see a bunch of Ledbetters show up, you have to worry about it. But there's one thing I'll say about the Ledbetter family. I'm going to share a brief story about what I think about the Ledbetter family. A number of years ago, gosh, it's probably been 25 years ago, my wife and I and our sons had a viable threat to our family. And I was out of town. I was actually in the Deer Woods. And the fire chief at the time, Doris Ballard, called me and said, this individual is on his way to your house. And I said, well, where's my wife and kids? He said, Mark and Karen Ledbetter called them, and they're over at their house. And you guys will never know what that meant to me. I knew they were safe. I knew they weren't going to get past Ledbetter, and I knew for sure they weren't going to get past Karen Ledbetter. So, but that meant a tremendous lot to me. So, Ty, you've got good blood in you. So, anyway, family, come on up here. You didn't know they were here, did you, Ty? Okay, this is a proclamation for Captain Ty Ledbetter. Ledbetter Appreciation Day, May 11th, 2021. Whereas Captain Ty Ledbetter was appointed COVID officer for the city of Conway at the onset of the pandemic, and whereas Captain Ledbetter spent countless hours on daily updates, tracking virus numbers, and educating the public on safety procedures, and whereas Captain Ledbetter implemented a citywide travel policy and gave guidance to the city for COVID procedures, and whereas Captain Ledbetter inspected every facility and worked with all departments head to set up operations to keep their employees safe, and whereas Captain Ledbetter worked with several local businesses in establishing COVID procedures, and whereas Captain Ledbetter educated the public on safety precautions related to the virus via social media and interviews with local news stations and radio stations, and whereas I'm getting old. And whereas Captain Ledbetter established protocols for outdoor sports venues in the city to allow for recreational sports to safely reconvene, and whereas Captain Ledbetter spent 2 weeks in New Jersey at a mass vaccination clinic while observing logistics to bring back to the city of Conway, and he actually swapped off with my son Tyler. And whereas Captain Ledbetter coordinated with local pharmacies, Conway Regional Health System, Baptist Hospital, state, county, and local officials to administer over 4,000 COVID vaccine shots. Now therefore, I, Bart Castleberry, Mayor of Conway, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, May 11th, 2021, as Captain Ty Ledbetter, Captain COVID, or COVID Cowboy, Appreciation Day. Well, pleasure. With our greatest appreciation, we hereby present Captain Ty Ledbetter, the COVID Cowboy, you can thank your daddy, for unwavering support and unrelenting guidance that helped in leading the city of Conway's path to success during the COVID-19 pandemic. You are being honored with much appreciation and gratitude in May 2021. Thank you, Ty. Would you like to say anything, or you just want to take it and run? It's up to you. Well, we appreciate the job you've done. Thank you, guys. Thank you. There you go, Ty. Thanks, sir. Thank you. And family, thank you for sharing him with us. We know he was away from you a lot. Thank you. Your wife raised a good kid there. All right. First, I'd like to ask the council to suspend the rules so we can set a public hearing to vacate portions of Mayor Lane. This is for possibly one of our businesses that's coming to Conway. And James Walden will address it if y'all choose to do so.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0. Mr. Walden. I'm sorry, Mr. Vinson.
Mr. Walden had to.
Cub Scouts.
Yes. Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, one of the two. Probably Cub Scouts, knowing the age of his kids. I think this is just a resolution to set a date for a public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Any further discussion? Our public hearing will be May 23rd, 2021 to discuss vacating easements. No further discussion. Mr. Garrett, would you call for the vote, please?
This be Resolution R 2134. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Thank you, council. Thank you, Mr. Walden. This is a big move for Conway. I'm sorry, Finley. Next, we have a Community Development Committee, and Mr. Hawkins, we'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item on this portion of the agenda is an ordinance approving a substantial amendment to the 2019 Community Development Block Grant Action Plan. We have an ordinance to read for this. It's ordinance 02155.
Make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0. We have Miss Kiera and Miss Felicia online for any questions for the council.
Kira, anytime it says a substantial change, can you help us with that?
Yes, so it's a substantial amendment, meaning that we are reallocating money that was set aside for projects and activities to our overnight projects. So we were notified by HUD probably a month or so ago that we had funding that had been unused even prior to. So we had to take that funding, which was around $28,000, and move it to a current open project so it can be spent. And then we just coupled that with other activities that had money either that did not meet the timeliness, meaning it wasn't spent in the correct amount of time or the time that we were allotted from HUD, or it was an activity that didn't either complete. So we were able to take that money and now again reallocate it towards a current project, but it's called a substantial amendment because of course we have to get it approved and also go through the citizens participation plan process.
Make a motion for adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Grimes? Aye. Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter? Yes. Ms. Mel? Aye. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 8-0. Thank you, Kiara. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry? Oh, okay. Mr. Hawkins.
I missed that as well. Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution to adopt the Faulkner County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan for the Transportation Department. And we have a resolution to be read for this. It's Resolution R2135.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Mr. Benson, would you like to
please.
give us a brief description, please, sir?
Sure. Really, it's the Central Arkansas Planning and Development District that has spearheaded this effort with assistance from not just my department, but also the planning department, the fire department, mayor's office, as well as all the other municipalities within Faulkner County and Faulkner County itself. And so, as I said, the Central Arkansas Planning and Development District has put together this document, the hazard mitigation plan. Months of effort have gone into it. We have one right now, and this is essentially an update / replacement of the existing one, which was passed some years ago. And they're asking all of the municipalities as well as the county to adopt it.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Council, any more questions, Mr. Benson? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution to purchase HDPE pipe culvert for the Transportation Department. Mr. Vinson, I know you're going to translate that and tell us what HDPE culvert pipe is. Aren't you?
Pardon?
Aren't you?
Yes, sir, I am.
Thank you.
High density polyethylene pipe.
Do you know that, Mr. Ledbetter?
That's exactly right.
Why don't you call it what it is?
The my
I'm a technical
belt
guy.
is made out of that high density stuff.
You know, if I'd have just said plastic, you'd
Ledbetter,
ask me what
thank you very
HDPE
much.
stands for.
Polyvinyl chloride.
I'm nothing if not accurate.
There it is.
I make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution for the HDPE plastic pipe
Plastic pipe.
for the Transportation Department. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution to approve the annual bid for paving and milling for the Transportation Department. And Finley, I know you're still standing there.
Yes, sir, I am. So we got one bid this year from the Rogers Group. Unfortunately, the bid price came in substantially higher than our estimate. We're told by the Rogers Group that they're so covered up with work this year that they're going to have to bring in a crew from out of town in order to complete this work. So for that reason, since we're over budget, we will probably not be completing all of the streets on this list. We will have to cut some in order to get it back in budget. But this is the list that was bid. The cost estimate, the budgeted amount was $700,000. So we'll have to cut a few streets from this list in order to get it in budget.
I make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution for the annual bid for paving and milling for the Transportation Department. Any further discussion?
Finley, will there be a list on the website of what streets, or will you just, you know,
Sure, I'd
so
be happy
people
to.
will know?
I'd be happy to publish the list once we've settled on it.
That'd be great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett.
This will be Resolution R 2137. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins, the final.
Final item on this portion, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution to authorize entering into an agreement for construction for the Barkham Square project for the Transportation Department. And one more time.
Yes, sir, thank you. We got one bidder on this as well, but they're a qualified bidder. It came in slightly over budget, but not that bad. And we're asking the council to award the contract to the Crow Construction Group.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution to enter into an agreement for the Markham Square project for the Transportation Department. Any further discussion?
We've used them before.
I don't think we've used Crow Construction. We have used Crow Paving.
Okay.
Yeah, out of Marlton.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
I got a question. It's not a negative question. The reason we're getting a lot of these bids is over. You think it's because of the price of what the materials that we need?
I mean, the construction industry in general has
Yeah, I've
seen,
been noticing everything they're saying is extremely high
yes,
right
high
now.
prices, low availability of materials. More than there is, yeah, there's more work than there are people to do it and material to do it with.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Garrett.
This will be R 2138. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Thank you, Finley.
Yes, sir.
Next is our Public Safety Committee. We have an ordinance to accept donation proceeds from the Conway Police Department, and Chief Tapley is with us tonight. Chief?
Good evening. We have received a grant from Arvest Foundation in the amount of $10,000 to purchase a canine. This would be the replacement for Canine Chip that we retired a couple of meetings ago, and we're asking that you accept this grant.
Make a motion to waive the 3 readings. Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0. What kind of time frame are you looking for this, Chief?
We're really on the time frame of the vendor. They get dogs in on a semi-regular basis, and we'll just have to find one that fits the needs for the school and us.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
I make a motion for adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Aye.
Passes 8-0. Thank you, Chief. And the last item on the agenda is finance, and it's a resolution to use reserve account interest earnings for the non-uniform pension fund. I think we talked about this at the retreat, but Mr. Winningham, would you step up, please, sir?
Yes, this is the resolution that we drafted at the request of Mr. Grimes with the idea that he came up to transfer our general fund reserve account interest to the non-uniform pension fund to help that fund with its funding level. So be glad to answer any questions, or Mr. Grimes, if you've got anything you want to add to it. This will, if this resolution passes, it'll become part of our annual budget process. We'll budget that transfer each year. So it'll be, this resolution will, show the council's intent, and then we'll actually put it into action with the ordinance for the budget each year.
Painless way to help shore up that non-uniform pension fund a little bit.
That's a good idea, Mr. Grimes.
Yeah, the fund is much better off than it was, but that unfunded liability continues to grow, and recent changes in accounting rules now requires us to disclose that pension liability, and that does affect other things such as bond ratings and so forth. So it can cost us in the long run as that continues to grow. So yeah, the best we can get a handle on it will surely benefit us.
Thank you, Mr. Winningham.
Make a motion for adoption. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
This will be Resolution R 2139. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Do you mind if I ask Mr. Winningham a question?
Not at all.
Real quickly. Mr. Winningham, thank you very much. And this is for clarification on my part, in 2020, we received funds from the federal government, and I've forgotten which act
CARES
it
Act?
was. Thank you very much. And it was, how much money was there? How much was that?
Well, we got a few different iterations, I guess, if you want to call it that. We got general CARES Act money, which was about $2.3 million. The airport received some CARES Act funding in the amount of just under 70,000, like 69,000 and some change. And then the CDBG program also got CARES Act funding for rental and utility assistance.
Okay, and there were very specific things that those could be used for, that those dollars can be used for. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
Have we used that money yet?
We've used the airport, and Felicia's still online. She could probably answer the CDBG question better than I can. The general CARES Act money, the $2.3 million that we received, we used it to reimburse ourselves for expenditures that we had already had as outlay relative to the COVID-19.
And that has taken place on an accounting,
Yes.
from an accounting standpoint, and so everything is flush? on
Yes.
that? Okay. Now, we also have money coming in 2021, is that right as well?
Rescue plan funds, yes, sir.
See, this is where I don't know what the names of these things, and I appreciate
Yeah,
you.
and the final number on that ended up being 12.2 million.
And where can we find what that can be used for, that money?
If you go to the U.S. Treasury website, they have a page dedicated to the rescue plan funding, and there's it's about 151 pages, which they're calling the.
Do you have the Cliff Notes version of that, Mr. Wayne?
Yes.
There was actually an article in the paper today.
Yeah. Is it?
Yeah,
Little
that
Rock-
kind of listed some of the
Little Rock
things.
paper?
Yeah, and then
Thank
Bart, you just mentioned that you
Yeah,
talked to
they,
French
in
Hill.
addition today,
To
in addition
add
today
the
was
drainage.
that they added stormwater.
Oh, they
That
have.
was not on the original, but
Yeah.
it is now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that goes back to the conversation we were having with James,
Yeah.
wanting to cap some of our open ditches in town, block them, cap them, and make trails out of them.
Okay.
On that webpage, there's also an FAQ file, which is only about 18 pages. So there's your Cliff Notes.
I knew you'd know where it was if it was out there. And it's on the what?
It's on the U.S. Treasury
Okay.
webpage.
Yeah, give me that Cliff Notes version.
Well,
Where is
even the Cliff
Same
Notes
place,
are.
it's in the US Treasury?
Yes, sir. It's on that page.
They won't call it Cliff Notes though, will
It's the FAQs.
Thank you very
Frequently
much.
asked questions. There's a PDF. If you open it up, it's about 18 pages, and it goes through and answers questions such as, what can the water, sewer, broadband infrastructure money be used for, and it gives some specific examples.
Now, as I understand it, that, if we don't spend that money right, we've got to pay it back. Is that right as well?
Correct. Yes, and kind of how it was explained to us at first is that the Treasury was just going to give us this money, and whatever we did not spend, we had to give back. And now it appears it's going to be more of an instance where we request the funds. So we'll only request what we plan to spend.
So they're not going to write a check, we hold the money, and I think that's probably pretty smart.
Yeah, because typically the rule on federal funds, if you get federal grant money, not just, an appropriation like this is, but federal grant money, you can only have it in your possession for 3 days.
Okay, very good.
But this is not a grant, so it doesn't fall under that same guideline, but it appears I know there's a portal where we're gonna have to register to log on to and request funds. So we'll only request what we're gonna spend.
Very good. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. I just
Yeah,
needed to.
I think the justifications stepped up a little bit on this next go-round too. We'll really have to be able to justify what and how we're spending.
Okay.
Yeah, this is for future spending only, and only is in quotation marks, because they have said we could go back as far as, I think, March the 3rd.
Okay.
Any expenditures from March the 3rd forward are eligible for the rescue plan funds.
Can you provide me with something that we spent it on in 2020? Can you do that for me? It's accounting.
The CARES Act funds?
Sure.
Well, the CARES Act funds were eligible for,
Just give me, no, I don't need it now, just. if
Oh,
you can-
okay,
Yeah,
sure.
no, if you can just, no, no, I didn't need it tonight.
okay.
I didn't need it tonight.
Well, I mean, we claim police and fire salaries.
Okay,
The municipal league was sort of the advisory board capacity on the CARES Act money. And they advised all the cities that the best, fast, easiest way to get your full amount is to claim police and fire emergency response worker salaries
Okay,
to get those funds, so that's what we did.
Okay.
But it was also eligible for other things such as technology, cleaning supplies, and anything related to responding to the pandemic.
thank you very
And
much.
we had an accounting ordinance or resolution, I can't
Yes.
remember
We
which.
did- we
that
did,
passed that,
But
yeah.
I just needed some refresher.
You bet, no problem.
Council, anything else? I will take a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank you.